Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Jon Vodicha. He's used to live in Czechoslovakia back in the days of communism, and briefly he's going to discuss that with us, and then we'll move on and see how that relates to Canada today. So welcome, Jon, and please tell us about Czechoslovakia back in the days of communism.
Well, it was, after World War, Second World War II, in 50s, so after 5 years after, it started to be, a terrible, experience for everybody who were hoping after war that it will some, better times. It didn't happen. So we had.
You were hoping that communism would improve the situation after the war.
Exactly. So it was, I was experiencing it from, because I was born in 49, and just about 2 years after, my father was jailed because he didn't, just agree with the, ideology of communist.
He was opposed to the communism. Who was the leader at that time? Do you remember?
In that time, I think it was Zapotocký.
Zapotocký, okay.
So, yeah. It started, it was.
Like what was some of the laws and limits and whatnot? How did the government operate, basically?
You had to comply with everything they said, and
no protesting.
No protest. You couldn't. That was a no.
What would they do to you if you protested any of their?
Well, you were prosecuted. You get prosecuted and probably jailed if you didn't agree. That's what happened to my father, right? So he just didn't agree with the ideology, and that was his basically. He survived the 2-year jail. He wasn't even, usually you go, if you are charged, you have to go in front of the judge, and
right.
They will decide. In that time, it was like you are guilty, you go.
And there was no appeal or anything.
No, nothing. No.
And what was prison like for your father? Was it just a jail, or was it a work camp? Or?
Yeah, it was a work camp. It was a uranium mine.
Was it like the Gulag in Soviet Union?
Almost, And the problem is that. He survived 2 years of that, that heavy labor. And, even the guards lots of guards were like sadistic people, and they enjoyed that, and they were allowed to actually kill people, torture people, everything. I still don't understand how my father could survive. He had to be, because if they didn't like someone, they just get rid of him, and let's say the relatives get the message that he died because of some failure, kidney failure or heart attack,
right.
or he was killed when he tried to escape.
Never because of the guards.
No. When they did this, to the people, they had bonuses, they were, it was.
I'm sure they were underfed and malnourished, correct?
Yeah, so it's just, in that time, it was, lots of people died there, just disappeared.
Awful.
And not even the people they died, they were never allowed to, what I heard, that the relatives, they had no chance to actually examine what happened. It was not allowed.
Right. No autopsy.
Nothing. They were just buried, and that's it. So it was really bad time, and it, let's say in that time it was probably the worst. In the early 50s was probably the worst, because they had to clean up all the people they didn't like. So it was like tough. After that, everybody knew that you have to go with the system, and you cannot do this, cannot do that. So it was a little bit, and then even people had, but let's say, for example, because my father was jailed, in my, let's say, and I didn't know in that time, much later. I couldn't do this and couldn't do that, and I was, why I cannot do that?
You were restricted because of
Exactly, because my father.
your father.
Exactly, they say, oh, he's a son, and all relatives. It means all relatives. And then I find out much later that actually I have a file somewhere, which said he is dangerous to the system. So he cannot do this, he cannot go to school, he cannot do this.
So you can't get, say, educated at a university or something?
I wouldn't probably be able to go to university, but it was always something, I couldn't do what others could do, let's say. So, and that's the reason why I actually came to Canada, because my children. Pardon?
What year did you come to Canada?
In 1990.
1990. You were there during the 1969 uprising, when the Soviet Union came.
Yeah, 68.
68.
68. Yeah, I just went to military. In that time,
Were you in the military?
Yeah, 2 years. It was mandatory. Everybody had to go. And when I went to military, it was right, but it was not like Soviet Union came. It came all the Warsaw Bloc,
I was the whole
exactly. It depends which part of Czechoslovakia you were in that time. I was in the military, close to the Polish border. So the Polish army came, and they just were keeping eye on us, because they were afraid that we could do something. We could do nothing.
Keep the people down.
And then when Polish soldiers, they were informed from our, let's say,
was there gun restrictions for the people? Like the people, were they allowed any weapons in those days, or were you?
It was, you had to, especially in military bases, was, like from.
But if you're just a regular citizen, say working in a factory, were you allowed to own a gun?
No, okay. That was.
So you had to be in the military.
I go back a little bit. Even when, let's say, the Hitler came to Czechoslovakia, my father owned a gun. He was a hunter.
Right.
And
that's pre-communism, right?
And it was like that was.
Just the Hitler coming in.
Just Hitler came in.
Oh, Nazi occupation.
Yeah, when he started the war. So when he came, one of the first things what his officers did, or it was a rule, that you have to turn your weapon, whatever it is, you have to. So my father had this rifle, but he didn't return it like that. He took some parts out of it. So it was like you couldn't be used. I don't know what.
Right. You made it inoperable.
Inoperable. Exactly.
Now, so
but we had to.
Canada in 1990. Did you notice anything similar to Canada as it is over there, or was it?
No. It's the Canada in 1990, and I would say until probably Trudeau came to power, it was still a country with all the potential, all the benefits, and I don't know where
So there was no similarity. Canada.
No similarity.
A wonderful place to live at that time.
Exactly. In that time.
And then when Trudeau came and you found things changed.
Exactly. I knew it from day one, or even before that, when he was actually that this person is not capable to do anything good for Canada.
Well, I remember when he said, when he's trying to get elected, and he said he admired China because of totalitarian rule.
Yes.
If they wanted to change things, they could turn things on a dime, because they didn't have to go through all the bureaucracy and worry about what the people thought. And I kind of thought that's kind of like a red flag.
Exactly, but this again, he's a person who was always, he was just a puppet. He was doing something he was told to do. Say something.
And who do you think that was?
Lots of people say it was, like Klaus Schwab or this.
So Klaus Schwab, you mean from the World Economic Forum?
Economic Forum, Soros, George Soros, and others. And I still think there is power over these people. It's something higher.
Right.
and they nobody knows about them. They really, can change everything. But why they changing it for worse? Let's say Trudeau was a liberal. For example, liberalism is basically a good thing, right? And they used same like Democrats in US. We are Democrats. We cannot do anything wrong because we are Democrats. And this is what people, fell for. That hey, Democrats, liberals, they are not. They are hiding behind this,
So what you're saying is
parties.
they pretend that they're offering freedom,
pretending
but they're really
exactly.
offering control.
Exactly, they are like, I would say, evil. And
Is that what happened in the Czech
Yeah,
Republic when the communists came in? They were rather liberal.
No.
No.
They right away they started
just
to know
right
that
away, there was
it
no-
was all like globalism. Like they are trying to. It was globalism in the small scale.
in the Soviet Union.
Exactly. That was everything was ruled from, let's say, from Moscow, and everybody had to comply. And
Right.
and if not, you had to. You had no choice.
So Trudeau comes in, and you've noticed it starts seeming more and more like communism.
Yeah. It was
what-
slipping.
Do you know some examples of what it reminded you of back in your old country when it was communism?
In communism, you had, the good thing even with communism was that people basically had. It was a law. You had to work.
Right.
It was not like unemployed or on welfare.
So they
or
find work for if you were unemployed?
You had to. It was a law. You had to work.
If you couldn't work, so you couldn't find a job, what would happen?
Well, you had
put you to
to. You
work?
had to find a job. Otherwise, you were, like.
So they would find
chased.
you work. Is what you're
You
saying.
have to work.
Yeah.
Somewhere, somehow.
Dig in a ditch, something.
Exactly. Only if you let's say you were disabled or something.
Right.
That was a different story. But otherwise, every healthy people had to find a job, and that was the limit. You couldn't be without job. Let's say more than 2 months, I guess, if I remember correctly. And otherwise, you were,
And you couldn't quit a job, right? You
you
had-
could quit the
quit a
job,
job?
but you had to have another one.
right.
You
I
quit
see.
when you
So
knew.
if you had another job to go to, then
Exactly.
but
You couldn't just,
out and out quit.
and then let's say for a year you would be doing nothing. It was impossible.
Right.
But I say this was kind of good because everybody had a job. Everybody was like, you cannot say forced to work because everybody, it's natural. You have
Well, of
to
course
work
you wanna
for living,
Who
right?
doesn't want to work?
So, yeah, but otherwise, it was always, always something you can do this and you cannot do that. You cannot do this. You cannot do this.
You had no
And nothing
you had
between.
no
No, not
self-autonomy.
No.
Everything was controlled by
No,
from the
everything.
government.
Again, people were very afraid to talk openly, let's say, about among friends.
Would you get thrown in prison if you talked down on the
Exactly.
government?
Somebody would say, oh, this guy said this. And they would come, take you, and jail you.
So you had your secret
So you
police as
had
well.
to be very careful. Even in families, people were very afraid to.
Would people ever lie about other people and say that they had said things that they didn't?
And lots of, exactly. I know examples, like, let's say our neighbors. This guy, let's say, he had a nice tree on the garden, whatever. And he hated him
Jealous
because
of him for it.
jealous of that.
Yeah.
So he just, made it up that this guy did this and say this.
He was saying bad things about the government.
And
He's gotta go.
exactly, it was so
what
easy
about-
to hurt
What
someone.
about Trudeau's Canada? Did you find similar to what was going on in Czech?
Well, the worst thing, during, let's say, he was very careful to do dramatic, when he like legalized, let's say, drugs, like smoking, and
Marijuana,
not big deal. Let's say, but it was like slowly getting, that, to get power over people, in one, with this law, he actually, lots of people were excited about it, right? But you have to do always, if you are in country, your rules must be you do your best for a majority. Majority is you have so many, you cannot make happy everyone,
Right.
but you do it for the best of the country.
Right.
Not for little groups or whatever
because special interest groups,
especially.
I mean,
so he was from day one. He was dividing people.
So you notice when they brought in the COVID vaccine and
COVID vaccine was like a bonus of all that.
Calling people
exactly how he was dealing with all these problems. If you have a problem, you deal with that with some kind of that people can believe you. And he couldn't do that. He was. I have, let's say, you don't have to be like, let's say, educated for seeing that person that he's talking nonsense and he's lying and,
right.
and you can check it. You go and you can find, so he was doing this, and lots of people were, like get along with it, and this truckers protest, right?
Well, I noticed too, the news, because I'm sure back in the days when you were in communism, they had the television and TV, radio were propagandizing whatever the government said. And I mean, that's something I've noticed living in Canada my whole life, that I've noticed the CBC and CTV have slowly started propagandizing whatever the government says, whether it's good or bad for the people. They always make it like it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And like the COVID vaccine, instead of saying, I believe in free choice, you should have the choice of whether to get that vaccine or not. And they were forcing it on the public. And that was, to me, that's totalitarianism, that's communism.
Exactly.
And that's what bothered me.
Yeah.
And then the truckers' protest proved that, when not only did they freeze the bank accounts of the protesters, but they freeze the bank accounts of anybody who supported them, which I can't understand why that's even legal. So that's where I saw us moving towards communism. So continue anyways with what you were saying. I'm just saying, want to bring it down.
Yeah, you know what? Back in Czechoslovakia, when you were listening the radio or TV, when they are saying something, you knew it's almost the opposite of what they are saying. It was almost 100% that they are saying something. Okay, then I know the truth is exactly on 180. Turn it around. So it's same is here now. The same is happening here. It doesn't go like strictly.
Like Joe Biden.
Goes slowly.
Joe Biden is coherent, and he's as sharp as a tack. And if you just look at the guy, you could see there was something wrong.
It's the Democratic Party just used. It's not actually him. This guy was used for this. I don't know, because he was a yes man.
Right.
This is the difference between Trump
with Joe Biden, that everything he signed, except one document, which I'll mention in a minute, but everything he signed was auto-signed.
Exactly.
So who knows if he even knew these things that were getting signed. So that tells me somebody else was controlling things.
Yes.
The only thing that he actually signed was the pardon for his son, to get his son out of prison. So everything else is auto-signed, which tells me he wasn't running the country. Somebody else.
Exactly.
And I mean, I'm sure.
And we can guess who, right?
There's controllers and handlers of all governments. I mean, they got to do what their sponsors, the people that finance them. So,
and again, whoever we call globalists, they do it.
Right.
They are everywhere around the world, right? They have some. You cannot say. It happening, World Economic Forum. Yeah, there are lots of people are getting there, and
we're going to get into this in the second half. So we're going to have to cut this short right now. Okay. In our next conversation with you, we'll get into more about the globalism of the world and talk about that. Anyways, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again. Have a great day.